I always recognized, perhaps more than the average person, how important happiness is. I just was never able to find it for more than brief periods in my life, and so I almost never used the word happy. I guess because I identify it as an emotion. Instead, I use the word satisfied, which is more of a statement of fact, something that can be measured or quantified. Like x equals 4 satisfies the equation of 2 plus 2 equals x. At some point, the issue is less about more than it is about not having less. Michael Jordan has talked about the joy of his first championship, but by the third championship, it had become more relief. Happiness had become the absence of misery, the misery of losing.
Success didn't come for Martin Manley, at least not like he originally planned.
His moment at the 1989 NBA All-Star Weekend, a few minutes in the national TV spotlight, had come and gone. In basketball heaven, his book and the argument for more three-point shots never took off.
In 1990, after the third edition of Basketball Heaven, Martin and Doubleday parted ways, and Martin determined that the third edition would be his last.
Basketball heaven is when I first made an impact on others with respect to sports, and so the experience will always be special. I am 100% confident that I was ahead of my time, too far ahead.
He dedicated years to producing a first-of-its-kind book series about the NBA,
a plea for a more efficient brand of basketball,
which now lined the walls of his garage. Kevin Mahar, Martin's assistant on the book, said the feeling was palpable.
It was more of a disappointment. It was a lot of time and effort, but yeah, I'd say it was just a disappointment. You know, I can't remember how many books we printed, but you know, there were still stacks of them in his garage, and you know, and then it was like, okay, this was fun. Now I got to go pursue a career.
Martin had a mission to become the Bill James of basketball, a sports analytics visionary. But with his dream effectively retired, Martin began pursuing something bigger, a way to live life, maybe not to its fullest, but to peak efficiency.
And as far as the basketball world knew or cared, Martin had simply disappeared. But that didn't mean his ideas vanished.
From 30 for 30 podcasts, I'm Rich Levine.
I'm Nick Altshuler, and this is Chasing Basketball Heaven, Episode 3, Almost Vulcan.
In the early 1990s, as Martin Manley was putting basketball heaven behind him, the NBA still didn't get it. Despite the lovely example set by shooters like Brian Taylor and Dale Ellis, and some very simple math, the three-point line was still mostly an afterthought. Meanwhile, the league got slower, less efficient. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had retired, and another generation of big men took his place to dominate the decade.
Hakeem Olajuwon.
Spin move by Hakeem.
Patrick Ewing.
David Robinson.
Shaquille O'Neal.
Then he brought it down. He brought the whole goal down.
They were the icons of the era.
Olajuwon has David Robinson just bamboozled.
These 7-footers who played in the paint.
Even the two guard who beat them all, a guy named Michael Jeffrey Jordan, did most of his work inside the arc.
MJ took it away. It's 1-on-4. Comes inside.
There was one time, though, in the 1992 finals, Jordan hit 6 threes in a half, and it was such an incomprehensible outlier that they put it in a Gatorade commercial.
There's Jordan for 3. Yes!
I'm sure many of you are picturing the Jordan shrug right now.
In 1993, there were more clues to the power of the three. That season, the Phoenix Suns led the league in three-point attempts and overall scoring. Their star, Charles Barkley, finally got the Manley-approved memo.
Barkley, he hasn't had a three, does now.
Barkley took, wait for it, 3 triples a game that year. 3. Barkley went on to win the MVP, and the Suns made it all the way to the finals. There they faced the Bulls, but lost in 6 games, thanks in large part to that Chicago teamwork that Martin had begged for in basketball heaven. You remember how Michael Jordan just needs to trust his teammates?
The Suns by 2. It has come down to this possession.
Down 2 in the final seconds of Game 6, Jordan brings the ball up, but is met with an immediate full-court press by Suns guard Kevin Johnson.
And because this is the 90s, the Suns are trying to prevent Jordan from driving to the hole and scoring the tying bucket.
Jordan passes to Pippen. Pippen drives. He draws Horace Grant's defender. He dishes to the big man on the left block. Grant immediately fires the ball out to John Paxson for the 3.
Here's Paxson for 3. Yes, the Bulls take a 1-point lead.
Paxson was open by about 20 feet. Jordan had 33 points, but with the game on the line, he trusted his teammates. The formula for success Martin had written years before.
But even after a championship-winning play that was peak efficiency, the league still didn't take proper advantage of the three-point shot. In fact, teams were playing even slower, and scoring steadily dropped. So the following year, 1994, the NBA moved the three-point line in by almost 2 feet. They were begging, "Someone, please, shoot more threes." And to a certain extent, it worked.
In 1994, NBA teams took an average of 9.9 threes per game. In 1995, with the shorter line, attempts jumped to 15.3. But despite the bump, league scoring still fell, and the big men were still the apex predators, a team's ace in the hole, and threes still seen as a roll of the dice. With centers dominating, the Admiral...
I think you're talking about David Robinson, who's 7'1".
I was. He won the MVP in 1995. Hakeem Olajuwon...
7 feet.
Won 2 titles in 94 and 95. Patrick Ewing...
7 feet.
Thank you, Richard. Could have stolen the 94 crown, as Knicks fans will tell you, if shooter John Starks had just hit a few threes in Game 7. Meanwhile, Dikembe Mutombo...
7'2".
Off the top of your head, you know that.
Mm-hmm.
And the 1994 Denver Nuggets still haunt Sonics fans, becoming the first 8 seed to upset a number 1. In 1997, the league moved the three-point line back to where it is today. Like we said, that shorter arc didn't have its intended effect on scoring. Pace and spacing also suffered. Meanwhile, as Martin and the 3 were both stuck between the past and the future, an interesting thing was happening in the world of basketball analytics. And without Martin even knowing it, he was at the center of it. Whether that was through fate or luck, your beliefs are up to you.
A new crop of stat obsessives were trying to bend basketball towards where they thought it could go, one jump step at a time.
One afternoon in the early 2000s in Seattle, Washington, a young man picked up a copy of Basketball Heaven, and without realizing it, also picked up Martin's torch.
So the UW library had a copy of it when I was a student at the University of Washington.
That kid was Kevin Pelton, a college student and basketball fan who fell in love with the game while listening to Seattle Supersonics radio broadcasts in the early 90s.
And I had a lot of time to read at that point on buses I was taking to and from campus and to and from my internship.
And that's where he found himself drawn into the world of Basketball Heaven.
It was definitely intriguing to me, even though obviously it was, already, a dozen years old probably by the point I was reading it.
And what was intriguing? Just the way he was thinking and the...
Yeah, I mean, again, there wasn't a lot of history when I was starting out. So I first kind of stumbled onto this, I would say, the summer of 2000, started reading Rob Nair on ESPN.com. Through that, found Baseball Prospectus and started asking, hey, who's doing this for basketball? Which the answer was not a lot of people at that point. But, Dave Heron, Martin Manley, they were key figures. And I was going to track down anything that existed. I was so passionate about learning about the history of the field.
Pelton went all in. He graduated from UW in 2004, and by then was already covering the Supersonics for the team's website. By 2009, he graduated to covering the NBA and WNBA for ESPN.
You may have heard of it. It's a sports company based in Bristol, Connecticut.
We now welcome in ESPN senior writer Kevin Pelton to talk about this NBA trade.
Pelton has spent more than 2 decades now studying and covering the NBA.
Daryl Morey traded for Lowry in Houston, then sent him to Toronto, got one.
What makes him unique in that world is that he writes about the league through a mathematical lens.
Kevin's work has helped build sports analytics into a way of understanding basketball's potential. A slow, steady way to put Martin-like ideas into the heads of countless basketball fans. A new fluency with analytics that, for diehards like us, can feel like it's always been there.
Kevin, of course, wouldn't say these things. What he would say is that the person who really brought basketball analytics to the next level was the next person we want to introduce you to. Kevin first met Dean Oliver online on a Yahoo group.
It's like you find the cave and there are all the hieroglyphics written, or maybe better than that, because it was like, oh, there's other people out here doing this.
For those of you who have never used dial-up, a Yahoo group was an early online discussion board. It was like participating in a subreddit or a message board, except every comment was transmitted over email.
But for our purposes, the Yahoo group was basketball analytics' first town hall. A place for like-minded stat heads to meet and exchange ideas and challenge theories.
Found your people.
I found my tribe. Yeah.
Actual discussions from these primitive days in February 2001. Does Hack-a-Shack work? What rule changes improve the quality of the game? Why has Charlotte had such a good record without Derek Coleman in the lineup and a mediocre one with him in?
A Caltech grad named Dean Oliver ran the group. At the time, he was just looking for a few people who were thinking about the game like he was. Folks smart enough to ask good questions, but naive enough to explore some crazy ideas.
Dean had majored in engineering, and unlike a lot of data obsessives, could actually hoop. He played point guard at Caltech, and he was busy working on his own book to change the game.
That put him in competition with Martin Manley and Basketball Heaven. We caught up with Dean in the occasionally noisy back lobby of the Embassy Suites Las Vegas during Summer League 2023.
He said he had taken in Martin's ideas and was less than impressed with his book.
It was casual. It was definitely casual. He was addressing questions I remember that I didn't. They were more superficial things. I am really trying to understand how basketball works, and I don't think that's what his goal necessarily was.
What do you think his goal was?
I think his goal was to kind of do fan perspective. Who are the best players and things like that, and just kind of the superficial things that they talk about on broadcast a little bit. I respect a lot of that, but it's not as deep as really what I wanted to understand.
For Dean, the North Star was Martin's North Star, Bill James. What Bill James had done for baseball analytics, that was what Dean wanted to do for basketball.
There was just one small problem that Dean couldn't let go of. Why had his hero, the real deal Bill James, co-signed on a book that Dean felt was lame?
When his book came out, I wrote a letter to Bill James and said, why did you endorse the book? Because I didn't think it was very good.
In short time, Dean received a letter back from James. All the years later, Dean still has this letter. He actually read it for us.
I wrote a cover quote from Martin Manley because it is my policy to help and encourage people who want to do this kind of stuff. As a first effort, his first Basketball Heaven is a lot better than my first baseball abstract. You can't compare his first effort to my 10th or 12th. If you think you can do better than he did, for Christ's sake, do it. It doesn't have to any value for me or anybody else for you to say you could do it better. Thank you, Bill.
After getting a kick in the pants from Bill James, the humble Dean wrote to Martin with some ideas and asking for help.
It was cordial. I was definitely actually trying to understand how he was able to get published and how he went through that process, and I felt like I had things that were complementary that could help
Which displays a level of confidence, obsession, and intensity that maybe Martin could appreciate, right?
He did not.
He was not necessarily the most friendly in his response. He was basically talking about him being way ahead of me and everything.
Being influential doesn't always work the way you want it to. Martin was going to influence Dean, just not as Martin hoped.
Faced with a snooty response from Martin and some tough love from their shared idol, Dean had all the fuel he needed.
Bill, I don't know if he hated me at the time. He obviously didn't know me, but it was pushing me. And I think I read it like, okay, I need to do better. I need to do better than him.
It took Dean nearly 14 years, but he finally met Bill James's challenge and delivered the answer to how he could best Martin. In 2002, Dean wrote a book people actually do remember, Basketball on Paper, widely considered the seminal take on basketball analytics.
I said, well, just give me a piece of paper and let me write down what's going on. And I wrote down how the ball went from one player to the next. And I remember figuring it out from what I had written down on paper. And like, oh, there's a logic here that just all these alternating possessions and how you can estimate them from basic stats and everything like that. That is when I realized I knew something at that moment that no one else in the world knew.
The foundational idea of the book was to break the game down into a series of possessions, a possession being a team's turn with the ball. By examining these component parts, Dean opened up a new way to look at the sport as a whole. Sure, a traditional box score can tell you that one team beat another. But by looking at how effectively teams used each possession,
which gives us stats like points per possession, pace, defensive rating,
you can start to understand why one team beat another.
It took the entire field a giant step forward. And for his work, Dean landed a paid consulting gig with the Seattle Supersonics.
The lovely green and gold.
You know, you actually won me over with that performance.
Thank you.
It is officially gold now in my book. But I can't emphasize this enough. While Martin's book got the conversation started, people were still thinking about the game in straight lines. Basketball on Paper added dimensions.
So why else did Dean succeed while Martin vanished into obscurity? In fairness to Martin, Dean was 16 years younger, so his research was aided by more capable computers, and even an early form of the internet. He didn't have to beg the league office for random box scores from Milwaukee like Martin did. And so, Dean became a revolutionary. He inspired a ton of people to look at the game with as much data as possible, and if that data was incomplete, find new ways to collect it.
Martin Manley had written Basketball Heaven hoping his ideas about stats would influence how the game is played. Dean was the first modern numbers guy to receive a paycheck from an NBA team, but he was still only a consultant, a voice traditional decision makers only tolerated. The first math man to call shots from the top of an NBA org chart was Daryl Morey. If you're a modern fan, Daryl Morey is possibly the first name you think of when you consider basketball analytics.
Like Martin, he's a man with full confidence in his ideas and how he sees the game.
Yeah, I have strong opinions on that. If you're mad how analytics is taking your sport, you should be mad at the rules. Like, because analytics is like gravity. It just happens.
Yep. Daryl does have some strong basketball opinions.
And he rode those strong opinions all the way to the front office of the Houston Rockets, which leads us to April 3rd, 2006.
This date marks a seismic moment in basketball analytics. After 3 seasons as senior VP for the Celtics, Daryl Morey was hired as the Rockets' assistant GM. The following spring, at 34 years old, he was named general manager.
I think we were really working on the real building blocks, basically starting with the first level below points, which is possessions, then efficiency with each possession, and then you can get extra.
Daryl Morey was a true believer in the power of stats.
Chances now with turnover, margin.
And suddenly he was calling the shots.
You can create an efficiency advantage either through field goal percentage.
With earthquakes, we use the Richter scale, which we're sure Martin admires for its clean simplicity. 1 to 10. Easy to understand. A 1 is a microquake, happens all the time. You don't even feel them. With a 10, everything breaks, and the landscape will never be the same.
In terms of its impact on the NBA, Daryl's approach is a 9. It even has its own nickname, Morey Ball, a play on Michael Lewis's Moneyball. With Morey Ball, the geography of the court is the same, but where the players position themselves is drastically different. Now everyone's spread out. The paint is empty, and there are seemingly 2 plays. One, drive to the hoop for a closer, higher percentage shot, or 2, drive to the hoop, draw the defense, and kick it out for a more efficient 3-point shot. Over and over again, the mid-range jump shot eradicated. This is a basketball strategy designed through the prism of statistics.
So basically all analytics and data do is whatever the rules of the game are, it's going to squeeze out every last bit of winning probability and efficiency.
To maximize his system, Daryl traded for James Harden, the perfect Morey Ball superstar with elite passing, driving, and 3-point shooting.
And James Harden with his 9th assist of the game, and he's almost got a triple-double in his first performance. James Harden.
But he also brought in players like Chuck Hayes, an undrafted, undersized center out of the University of Kentucky, with a comically awkward jump shot.
If you want something funny, go to YouTube and look up Chuck Hayes free throw.
We've done this and highly recommend it. Hayes is at the foul line and starts his motion on what looks like a normal free throw. But then just as he's supposed to release the ball, he doesn't.
Oh my goodness.
Instead, he falls forward and fires an off-balance line drive at the rim.
That's one of those you don't even want to watch. Look at this.
If you went to Kentucky at the time to scout them, you'd have to have a really good eye to see a 6'4.5" center who can't release the ball and say that guy is going to be a good player in the NBA. But the data was pretty overwhelming when he was on the court. So he's like almost the plus-minus poster child.
It was the same concept Martin Manley was writing about nearly 20 years earlier. Just because a player doesn't score a lot of points doesn't mean he's pointless. In this case, Daryl quickly came to believe that this awkward, undersized Chuck Hayes was more valuable than former all-star power forward Juwan Howard. Daryl shared this opinion with the Rockets head coach.
I remember talking to Jeff Van Gundy. We were basically saying, hey, Jeff, Juwan was a great player, but this kid Chuck is better. And he was like, well, but Chuck can't shoot. And we're like, yeah, that's good. He won't take any of those terrible mid-range shots.
Eventually, Daryl hired offensive-minded coaches like Rick Adelman and Mike D'Antoni. He assembled an organization built from the ground up to play efficiently. The Morey Ball strategy is at the core of just about every offense you see in the league today.
But even if this style of play was effective, and again, clearly more efficient, there was one snag. Many fans hated it.
Has analytics ruined the NBA?
The NBA has evolved, and it might be ruining the game of basketball.
Teams used to play to the strengths of their players and have their own unique play style.
Pretty much everybody plays the same way.
Running up and down the court, shooting threes, or if you get a wide open layup or a dunk.
And until they lower the competitive advantage to be gained from shooting and making more threes, this is a problem that is here to stay.
Fans found basketball played at its most efficient to be, simply put, ugly.
An offense built around threes and layups. An offense based on principles of efficiency. The short shots go in more, the long ones get you more points. Not a lot of variety. But that's not Daryl's problem.
You're going to get shoved to whatever is most efficient. You know, three-pointers shouldn't be worth 50% more than the other shots on the floor. And until somehow that's changed, teams are going to keep shooting more threes.
And that's not our problem either. Our problem is this.
Martin Manley. I'm actually struggling to even find Martin Manley when I look on the internet.
It's sort of a big deal that Daryl Morey, who in many ways is the true example of success in basketball analytics, doesn't even know who Martin is.
Sorry, did I ruin the podcast already?
No, Daryl, that's our job.
You might be curious. After all the writing Martin did about the three-pointer and efficiency, why people like Daryl didn't know who he was, or what happened to him after publishing Basketball Heaven. Dean Oliver, who wrote the book Basketball on Paper, certainly was.
I do remember wondering what happened to Martin, but he didn't really have a big footprint, and so I couldn't find him.
Did you hear about Martin when everything kind of went down with him, like at the end of his life?
I actually don't even know the full story.
So he told Dean the full story.
Man, the look on his face.
I have never heard any thought like that. I mean, it's almost Vulcan, like from Star Trek, right?
Vulcans are a species who operate by cold logic and reason. Mr. Spock, half Vulcan, was the cool customer who balanced out the hot-headed Captain Kirk. Martin and Spock would have made a hell of a pair. Real-life relationships were trickier. More after the break.
After Basketball Heaven in the mid-1990s, Martin Manley was back on the ground, working for Millionaire Joe, his old buddy and Basketball Heaven financier. He also returned to normal human waking hours in that beautiful Topeka home with his beautiful Topeka wife. It's the way to live, but not the life Martin wanted. The atmosphere was changed. Martin and Chris might have had their moment, but it quickly became clear that the dream was over.
Chris and I drifted apart. I take 100% of the blame. She was a very committed person and would do anything for me. It's not intended to be an excuse, but my mom and dad were essentially both only children. They really didn't understand, nor were they able to pass on the idea of family. Both parents and my two siblings were all relatively individualistic people. We lived out in the sticks, many miles from the nearest town. You either learn how to entertain yourself or you'd go crazy. I probably did a little bit of both, as it turns out. But one thing is for sure, I learned how to exist in my own world.
Now, you might think that Martin being in his own efficiency-obsessed world would mean that he wanted to be alone, maybe even needed to be a loner. But here's a little something we've learned about Martin. He liked to be alone, just not by himself. Deep down, he loved love.
He loved sappy duets.
I would say that other than my obsession with James Taylor, the duets were about the only other thing that moved me musically in the 1980s and 1990s, and so I started collecting them. This might seem like it wouldn't be that hard to do, but in those days, even researching what duets had been on the charts or slipped through the cracks, and by who and how to get a copy, etc., was very difficult.
Love drives us all to strange places. Martin was no exception, utterly unafraid to go wherever it took him.
My all-time favorite film is Little Shop of Horrors, 1986.
Audrey Jr. will be the sweetest thing in the whole wide world.
There are many reasons why. It's funny, it's clever, it's got great music, and it can't be squeezed into a particular genre. It's weird.
Of course, his favorite movie could never beat Shawshank or The Godfather.
There probably aren't 1,000 people in the world that would list it as their all-time favorite movie, but I'm one of them.
A cult classic, Little Shop of Horrors is the story of a flower shop employee, Seymour, who discovers that one of his plants is sentient, carnivorous, and hungry for human blood. Oh, and human love. Honestly, it makes sense that Martin could view that movie and much of life through the eyes of shy, awkward Seymour, Little Shop of Horrors' scrappy plant lover.
So Martin got back into the dating game, back on the market.
Wooing local singles with his poetry on Matchmaker.com.
Morning comes soon, and I pry open my eyes. Though your face I can still plainly see. The Sandman and Tooth Fairy have said their goodbyes, but your face still lingers with me. Yes, Mary is pretty and Jacqueline is fine and Connie is beautiful too, but Sheena was tops till the second in time I clicked on Kathy 242.
Hot damn. We're not sure how that particular slice of eloquence worked out for Martin, but soon enough, he met his match.
An early 30s divorcee and mother of 2 young girls, Terry Hansen.
Well, I thought he was nice looking, but he had a glamour shot picture of him in a tuxedo, which was kind of a turnoff, but I thought I'd give him a shot.
We've seen this photo, and girl...
It's a glamour shot like your high school prom picture is a glamour shot. His collar is bent crookedly over what is clearly a clip-on. His tufted hair is parted broadly down the middle, like when a cow tramples its way through a cornfield.
There is a separate picture, after an outfit change, of course, where Martin looks like an absolute stud.
The man was capable of both.
So dichotomous.
But he had no one to tell him, maybe, don't stop to rent a tux. At least, no one he would ask for advice. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done this on that first date with Terry.
He brought a photo album on the date to show me all the work that he'd done on his house. Like he was trying to impress me.
At least he didn't bring a stud finder and hold it to his chest. Beep, beep, beep. Ooh, I found one. Still, Martin found a way.
Okay, this sounds terrible. He actually spent the night. We didn't sleep together. I had a pull-out couch, and he lived in Topeka, and we'd been up so I let him sleep on the couch overnight. But we went to a movie the next day. It was There's Something About Mary, and we're watching the movie in the part where Brett Favre comes in. I said, oh, Brett Favre, and he said, will you marry me?
Less than a year later, Martin made his proposal official.
There were times when I was actually a romantic, although even being romantic was tempered by my analytical way of thinking. In this particular case, that made what I did in my proposal to Terry special, at least in my opinion. I decided to do it via a crossword puzzle.
We were going down to the Lake of the Ozarks, I think, was camping with some friends. So on the way there, I was doing the crossword.
Terry liked doing crossword puzzles because she was good at them. She was always smart, getting her degree in MBA while working full-time, straight A's. She then got her CPA. Anyway, I made up a crossword puzzle that I knew she would want to do. I made it the size of USA Today's paper and put it in as an insert.
I knew that he had made it up and what he was asking because it was it was too easy. But I didn't let on. I let him think he was surprising me, so.
The insert showed the puzzle filled in with the answers. TLW, will you marry me? MAM. Foolishly, she said yes.
Honestly, I'd have said yes too. I love a good crossword puzzle. But after they tied the knot, it didn't take long for Rico Suave from the Glamour Shots to rather abruptly reveal his true self.
I just remember him losing interest in our relationship pretty soon after we got married. And that was the hardest thing.
You said once you completed a project, he moved on to the next thing pretty quick. Do you think once you exchanged rings that like his job was done in his head?
Yep. I remember it being different on the honeymoon. His focus changed.
It was little things.
Martin things.
For instance, instead of dinners at Outback Steakhouse or trips to the movies, Martin was now more concerned with...
Oh, yes, the weather. The weather. He got into deciding, I guess, who was the best weather forecaster. So every night he watched like 3 different stations to see their predictions and then compared how close they were to the... So like we couldn't go out anywhere because he had to be home because we didn't, we didn't have a DVR back then.
And he's doing it for no other reason than just...
It interested him.
So we can't go out to dinner tonight because I need to be home to see the weather report.
Well, we could go, but we have to be back at, 6 or whatever.
He also fell back into unhealthy sleeping habits.
We lived daylight hours, and the kids always had to be quiet because he was sleeping all day, and then he'd be up all night. I did start to resent that. In fact, I started charging him rent that last year because he was just a roommate. I mean, we never saw him. We weren't sleeping together.
Finally, in 2004, after less than 5 years of marriage, Terry filed for divorce.
You know, he had changed. He wasn't fun anymore.
No matter how much I liked the idea of a second chance marriage, especially with kids, I was still largely a fish out of water. I tried to be moldable, and God knows Terry tried to mold me. But at some point, I think I rebelled against it because I just felt I was losing my identity.
A lot had changed in Martin's life. Now, on the other side of 50 years old, the dream of a basketball heaven, to be the Bill James of basketball, was long over. So was his relationship with Terry. He was lost. So in true Martin fashion, he found some things to hold on to. Like, really hold on to.
When I was about 54, I started wearing a fedora all the time. Okay, I didn't wear one when I slept at night, and I didn't wear one in church. Otherwise, 100% of the time, even when home alone, they just became a part of who I was. There are plenty of people whom I've met over the past 6 years and have gotten to know that have never seen me without one.
With a new look locked down, he turned back to the one thing that was always there when he needed it: work.
I decided I needed to do something that I would enjoy, and I took a job with the Kansas City Star sports department responsible for statistics. Pretty much all I had to do to get the job was hand them a copy of one of my books.
For 7 years, Martin crunched the numbers as the Star's statistics editor, bringing his very Martin-like work ethic to writing analytics-inspired content about the Royals and Chiefs for Upon Further Review, a sports blog on kansascity.com.
I was a workaholic. I never missed a day. I rarely even took my vacation. I never took breaks, never stopped to eat during a shift, worked my butt off pretty much every minute I was there because I just wanted to work.
Ceaseless toil? Don't threaten Martin Manley with a good time.
Basically, I lived, ate, drank, and slept when I had time. Kansas City Sports, Kansas City Star, and Upon Further Review. What life?
Finally, all that work became too much of a good thing.
The amount I alone was responsible for just kept increasing and increasing. I could only work 70 hours a week for so long before I just couldn't take another second of it, literally.
So Martin quit.
My last second was February 6th around 11:55 p.m. I wrote my final article on UFR that night.
He was finally free from the shackles of work. So what did Martin do? He created more work, filling the void by fanatically writing for a new sports blog of his own. He called it Sports in Review.
It took about a month to get Sports in Review up and running, but once I did, I took on the same mentality. I never skipped a day.
The Cal Ripken of KC sports bloggers.
I doubt if there is another human being alive that has published as much database research with commentary as I have over that time period, no matter the field. The question is whether I'm complimenting myself or condemning myself. I think I'm complimenting, but I can see both sides. You be the judge.
What Martin found when he turned his raging workaholism to the internet in 2012 was a place where everyone could, and it seemed like everyone did, have a blog. This was the heyday of a million niche corners filled with self-styled experts drawing small crowds to argue and opine about everything. Martin's new home was the perfect place to pour all his varied interests.
But more and more, his life became a series of math problems.
The other day, I was in a fancy FedEx retail store where there's a little fridge with several different kinds of pop. They're all the same size, 20 fluid ounces. The cost was $1.50 each. That's 7.5 cents per ounce.
Quick calculations.
A 2-liter bottle of Sam's Cola or a variety of other soft drinks is about 60 cents at Walmart. A 2-liter bottle has 68 fluid ounces, so that means it's less than a penny per ounce. And that means that the pop I drink at home is about 8 to 9 times cheaper per ounce than at the FedEx store.
All to solve for a most efficient life.
Martin was ahead of the curve on the whole self-optimization, 5-hour work week, meal replacement shake existence. Martin was on it far before the social media influencers, before there were social media influencers. He started with food, 1 meal a day.
And he would never spend more than $6 on that meal, which created a brief hurdle when it came to ordering a pie from his beloved Godfather's Pizza.
I finally figured out the best way to do it. There is a long-standing $4 off coupon on their site for a jumbo, and so applying that with tax, just over $28. They cut it into 12 pieces. I would have 3 slices each day for 4 days. That's $7 per day, but I get back to the average of $6 because almost every other meal is less than $6.
He also went even deeper back into his basketball heaven sleeping habits.
I tried everything. One that worked for a while was staying up 36 hours and sleeping 12. I felt that was the most efficient because I had more prime hours in which I could work.
The more comfortable Martin became in his own efficient world, the more fearful he became of life on the outside, a world he couldn't control.
I decided I would never leave the country. The main reason is because I have zero confidence in my safety anywhere else. The horror stories you hear about, those of Americans being targeted, kidnapped, or arrested in some foreign land, are more than enough to discourage me from being one more victim.
And living online, Martin ran headlong into a phenomenon that is now clear. There's a community for everyone.
I practically lived on the internet over the last 15 years, and I made a lot of friends. I probably operated better in that environment than in the real world.
But the more you socialize online, the more isolated you can feel. Martin's life was wildly efficient, but it was also incredibly exhausting and lonely, rootless. All of it perfectly dialed in and calibrated to his own specific ideals of peak performance and optimization.
4 P's to a healthier you. Pizza, Pepsi, poop, and pee.
He lived this way for years.
Until one day, Martin did the math and landed on a different solution.
I decided I wanted to have one of the most organized goodbyes in history, and I think I will be successful.
He planned the most efficient death.
You will rarely get any details for why a person committed suicide, but that won't be the case with me. This may be the most detailed example of a suicide letter in history. Something to be entered into the Guinness Book of Records. My hope is that it is.
Almost Vulcan. If you or someone you know is having thoughts of suicide or is in emotional distress, help is available. Contact the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988 or 988lifeline.org.
Next time on Chasing Basketball Heaven, Martin tests his commitment to efficiency.
My New Year's resolution is to explore the idea of committing suicide sooner rather than later. Meaning, don't just put it off until I become too old to matter to anyone or too old to record my life for posterity.
And begins work on his magnum opus.
Let me ask you a question. After you die, you can be remembered by a few-line obituary for one day in a newspaper. Or you can be remembered for years by a site such as this. That was my choice, and I chose the obvious.
Chasing Basketball Heaven is a 30 for 30 podcast produced by ESPN, Hyperobject Industries, and Metal Arc Media.
It was reported and hosted by Nick Altshuler and Rich Levine, with Craig Kilborn as the voice of Martin Manley.
Executive producers from Hyperobject Industries and Meadowlark Media are Adam McKay, Claire Slaughter, and Bradley Campbell. Senior editorial producer of 30 for 30 Podcasts is Preethi Varathan. This series' senior producer is Raghu Manavalan.
The series producer is Gus Navarro.
Consulting producer was Gary Honig.
Story editors were Jamie York and Mac Montandon.
Sound design and mixing by John Delore.
Theme song composed by Allison Leighton Brown and John Delore.
Show art by Brian Lutz.
Fact-checking by Matt Giles and David Sabino.
For 30 for 30 and ESPN, line producer is Catherine Sankey.
Associate producer is Isabella Seaman.
Production assistants are Diamante McKelvey and Anthony Salas.
Producer is Carolyn Hepburn.
Senior producers are Mark Keese Daisy and Gentry Kirby.
Heather Anderson, Marcia Cook, Brian Lockhart, and Burke Magnus are executive producers for 30 for 30.
Rights and clearances by Jennifer Thorpe and Cal Griffith.
This podcast was developed by Tara Nadolny and Cynthia Parabello.
To listen to more sports series like this one, search 30 for 30 Podcasts wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us at 30for30podcast.com. Thanks for listening.